What's on my mind today? What's on my mind today is speaking my truth, being assertive. That is something that at the age of 50, I finally feel like I'm getting better at, but it has been a lifelong process for me. I can recognize very easily how, as a girl growing up in the 70s and 80s, that I was definitely taught, like so many other girls in our society, that I really need to make other people happy. I need to say things that sit well with other people. I need to not say things that are going to cause any conflict or any discomfort on the part of the recipient, particularly if that recipient is a man. Um, Many women growing up, in this society as well as societies across the world, are taught subtly or not so subtly the same message. And so, for a lot of women in particular, we struggle with being assertive. We struggle with using our voice. We struggle with having difficult conversations. And that is a lesson that I have hammered home for myself, particularly in the last 4, 5 years. How do I find my voice? And it's so interesting to me that, as someone who's worked with people in my private practice or in my work before, I talk about assertiveness all the time. And, there are people out there like attorneys and other folks who are, their whole job relies on being assertive and, forthright. But in their own personal lives, they find it challenging to do those same things. And I can say the same thing. I can get in immigration court and be steadfast and have a real great verbal spar with the federal attorney, and argue on behalf of my clients and all those things. But why did I find it so difficult to say things that are difficult, that might not be received well by the person I'm talking with? I have had to learn to use my voice in my own life. And every time I do it, I feel so good and so empowered, even though when I was actually doing it, sometimes I had to really struggle to find the courage to say what I needed to say. So that's something that I know a lot of people can relate to, not just women, of course, but a lot of people. And so I had an example of this just yesterday. That's why this is on my mind, where I had this interaction with someone on social media that I really don't know, and that it's not like somebody who's going to be a dating prospect or anything like that, but just a kind of a benign introduction conversation. And in that conversation, the person I was talking with, who happens to be a man, said something to me, or communicated something to me that really, I can remember when I read it, thought, ooh, that's weird. And I kind of let that voice slide on by. And the response that I sat and typed out was something like, oh, okay, that's fine, go ahead and do that thing. Even though I was like, that's a strange thing that he's asking, and that he was proposing, which was, felt quite disempowering, is what I'm going to say, and was just a strange thing to say to me. And so anyway, I wrote out this like really polite response, and and was like, well, that was a strange thing, but. And then I went for a run. And when I run, I don't love running, but one of the things I love about running is that I'm able to work out situations in my head. And as I'm running, I had to stop, and I was like, holy crap. I wrote something to that person that was completely not legitimate, and not how I felt. Why did I do that? And so I made a resolve to myself that when I finished my run, I was going to go home and I was going to write my real response. And I did. So I sat down and I wrote him a different response. And I said, upon reflection, I want you to know that what you suggested actually felt quite disempowering to me. Felt like that doesn't sit well with me, what you suggested. And I won't give details about it because it's not sexual in nature or anything like that. It was just a strange social interaction of, whatever. So I wrote back and was like, no, actually don't do that. That feels disempowering to me as somebody who's a feminist and who has worked really hard to kind of gain my own footing. That I'd like you not to do that, and thank you very much. And so let's just, whatever, leave it there. And what I had to let go, I don't often refer back to my Buddha back there. But what I had to let go was the idea that he was going to respond in a way that was like, oh, I'm so glad you shared that with me. Thank you for that understanding. I had to let that go. And I also had to let go the idea that he was going to respond at all. And in fact, sometimes when we speak our truths, especially if we do it in writing, we might not get the reinforcement of a response, which really sucks. It's like being ghosted communication-wise. But I let that go for the better, again, the sake of, and I also had to let go the idea that this might ruin this new social connection, which is fine. But I had to let that go. If I were polite and just kind of let him do what he said he was going to do, which involved communicating with somebody that was important to me, I was like, I wouldn't have, that social connection wouldn't have been valid anyway. So I had to let go the idea that I would have this, new Facebook connection. So I spoke my truth. I felt good about it. I'm glad I did. And ever since then, I've just been thinking about this concept of it's something that recurs all the time in my practice, all the time in my classrooms, just all the time. So I just have kind of vowed to myself to, as much as possible, to speak my truth. I'm always assertive. I'm not aggressive. I don't call names or labels or point fingers. I just try to say this situation, whatever it might be, feels this way to me. I have these thoughts. This is what I would like to happen from it as a result. This is what I need to ask of you, or this is what I need to say. And sometimes I have to catch myself, just like this time yesterday. My first response was, to mollify the situation. That was not authentic. So it's something that I have to really I've had to train myself to do. And so if this resonates with anybody who might happen to watch this video, then, maybe this little journal exercise that I'm going to suggest that I'm going to do tonight might help too. This week, my theme is journaling prompts, and I seem to like to count. So tonight, I'm going to sit with my journal, and I am going to write out 5 sentences of things that I want or need to say to someone. It may take me a while to figure that out. What are the things that I really need to say? But I'm going to do that. And the way I'm going to do it is I need or I want to say such and such to whomever. 5 things. They may be things I'm going to say to somebody tomorrow, maybe next week, maybe next month, maybe I'll never say them. But they might be minor things. They might be major truths. But I think this is going to be good practice for me to continue to keep in my mind that I need to speak my truth as much as it's appropriate. And when I feel like I have the emotional energy to spend on that. So if anybody watching this wants to kind of play along, that's how I suggest you do a journaling exercise. Just write down, take all the time you need to sit down and just think of 5 things you want or need to say to somebody. And then think about how you might accomplish that. And so the song that's on my mind is a song by an artist called Sarah Bareilles, and I had to look up how to pronounce her name because it is a French name, and that is not how I predict it would be pronounced in France, but it's her truth, and so her name is Sarah Bareilles, and the song is a song called Brave, and it is about that very thing, speaking your minds, even though it's hard, even though other people may not want to hear it, and it's just a kick-ass song. And for me, it's special because speaking of running, I started running on a dare at the age of 44. And at that time, I couldn't run from one block to the end without having to stop. I was cardiovascularly completely out of shape. And a friend of mine dared me, basically, to start running and to run a half marathon with her. And I did run that half marathon on that dare. And I ran it actually 5 years ago this month. I ran my first half marathon. And if anybody's ever run one, you'll know that your first one is really grueling. And right at mile 13, you just kind of feel like you hate life and you're going to die. Why did I do this? What am I? Ugh. And so I was really having a hard time at that point. And this particular run that I did, when you start that last mile, you basically can see the finish line, which is kind of like torture because you can't like jump over and get there. You have to run another mile until you get to that finish line. And I was just like, I'll never get there. And the song that came on in my playlist that I had was that song. And forever now, I will always think of that moment whenever I hear this song. And that song propelled me to be brave and courageous, not speak my truth at that moment, but keep moving. And I did finish that half marathon. So that song is really just really apropos to this whole topic. So I'll add it to my playlist. And I did realize actually the other day that you can't search on Spotify for my Day 1 2020 playlist. So if you would like to, follow that playlist, the link for that is in my Instagram, which is Day 1 2020. It's in the bio. And it's also in the channel description here on YouTube, the link for that. So I will add that to my playlist. And that's my truth.